let's set the scene a little bit. I'm 18 years old. I'm in college. I've been living away from home for about a month, and I'm living in the dorms, which limit the amount of bandwidth each student is allowed to use per week. I can't just spend all my off time watching Netflix or YouTube, and I don't have cable anymore because I don't live with my parents. Luckily, finding alternate forms of entertainment isn't a huge problem for me because I spent most of my middle school years just going to the library. I can't use the internet that much, so I decided I'm going to, keep my reading schedule up. And this was where my memory first started to get fuzzy because I'm not exactly sure what possessed me to go to the school student bookstore instead of, the library, where books are free. I went to the student bookstore and used my student ID points to buy books. I remember I bought the first Scott Pilgrim book because I loved the movie. I remember getting the Garth Nix Lord Sunday series. That's probably not the title of the series. And then one day I walked in and saw this book, The Glamorous Double Life of Isabella Bookbinder. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, this is the book that made me stop reading. Temporarily. So what is it about this book that ruined reading for me temporarily? Honestly, I'm just going to have to be going off of my memory at this point because I have not read, interacted with this book at all in the last 10 years or so. In order to verify that this was the book that bothered me so, I did read the first couple of lines because what I remember frustrating me was evident by the first paragraph or so in this book. But I haven't read the back. I haven't read any more than the first couple of lines. We're going to do that together. So here's the plan. I'm going to record what I remember frustrating me so much about this book, but I'm not going to be showing you guys this so that we can all go in with a clean slate for this work of fiction. Hopefully fiction, based on what I remember. So I just did film what I remember, and you'll see that later. But for now, let's read the back of this baby, shall we? Isabella Bookbinder is a 27-year-old assistant at the Saturday Mercury newspaper in London. That's really funny. I thought it was London, but I wasn't 100% sure. But that makes sense. She has a disinterested boyfriend, a mother who loves clothes that match, and a father who always expects her to do better. Although Isabel may spend most of her time measuring newspaper column inches, she's well on her way to becoming a best-selling author. She's already perfected her look, cashmere tracksuit, lots of mascara, is working on her toned size 8 figure, and gets up at dawn to work on her novel. Well, sort of. She even has a fabulous mentor, a best-selling but increasingly eccentric author who takes her to glamorous book parties and introduces her to the dreamy literary agent Joe Madison. But when she inadvertently exposes a political sex scandal and her name becomes known for all the wrong reasons, her glamorous double life starts to spin out of control. I don't remember that, okay? With her distinctive voice, penchant for getting in sticky situations, and blind confidence in her dream of becoming a famous novelist, Isabel Bookbinder is a heroine you can't help but root for. I'm intrigued. I'm already really intrigued. I understand, as someone who was writing a novel, why I would have been attracted to this book. We'll see, I guess. Let's read the beginning now. The Glamorous Double Life of Isabella Bookbinder, a novel by Holly McQueen. Chapter 1. In the beginning. God, I feel inspired. I woke up with the dawn for starters. At least, I thought it would be dawn, but it turns out that in early January, dawn doesn't start dawning until about 7:30. I'd set the alarm for 4 because that had sounded a lot like dawn to me, but when it rang, it was still so pitch black outside that I bashed it off and slept a couple of hours longer. When I woke up again, there was a glowing winter light coming through the curtain, so I've been admiring that for a bit. Novelists are supposed to do this kind of thing. It's my first day on the job, so I want to make sure I get the basics right. I must say, it's very pleasant. I'm not too clear exactly what I meant to do about admiring the light, though. I mean, it gets a bit boring after a while, just staring in raptures at a gap beneath the curtain. Do I just lie here? Take some notes? Knock up a sonnet? On second thought, I think the whole admiring the glowing winter light thing is a bit too much like hard work. You can't be creative when you're all stressed out. I'm going to go and make myself a coffee. I'm already thinking that I might have taken this book too seriously when I first read it. This is fun so far. I bypassed my usual frothy instant cappuccino in favor of strong black stuff made in the stovetop pot. This is another of the basics that I'm determined to get right at the outset. While the pot bubbles away, I contemplate lighting up a cigarette. One of those slim, elegant French ones would be great. I could wrap myself in a cashmere blanket, sip my black coffee, and draw languorously. This is why I'm not an audiobook person, voice actor. And draw on my cigarette while doing a bit more of that gazing at the dawn stuff. The only problem is that I don't smoke, so I haven't got any slim, elegant cigarettes lying around. I'd have to pinch one of the Russell's horrid, shrivelly roll-ups, which isn't quite the same thing. Still, I must think about investing in a cashmere blanket. Yeah, this is parody. Oh no! Coffee in hand, I go back to my room, dig about the back of my wardrobe, and assemble an inspiring outfit to really get the word count flowing. I pull an old pair of Chinese silk pajamas a couple of sizes too large, a tie rack pashmina, and a little knitted bobble hat Mom gave me for Christmas. When I glance at the mirror, I don't look artsy and creative. I look like Judi Dench off to walk the dog. So I change into my diesel jeans and a black turtleneck instead. Perfectly artsy enough. I pile my hair into a messy Okay, it's because it's British, isn't it? It's British, so I don't know these words. I think that's enough to start. I'm going to go read this in peace by myself, where I can Google all these weird British words that I don't know. Okay, so what do I remember about this book? The most vivid thing I actually remember is the first chapter. I remember it opening with Isabel, who's an aspiring author, narrating. It's a first-person point of view book. God, I feel so inspired. Today is the day. I'm gonna write the book today. And that sort of the vibe is just this very dramatic, I'm going to write today mindset. And then she immediately does something else. I don't remember what, just I know she does not actually sit down to write. And that sort of characterizes her. A lot of aspiring and not a lot of doing, which there's nothing wrong with that in a person. Just gonna say that. That's a fine character flaw, actually. As the plot progresses, somehow Isabel meets in-universe J.K. Rowling. I swear, I remember reading it and being like, this is clearly a stand-in for J.K. Rowling. There's no way it's not. And there's an in-universe Harry Potter, okay? I'm sure it will be obvious to me again when I reread it. Somehow Isabel meets in-universe J.K. Rowling, and it becomes obvious that in-universe J.K. Rowling didn't actually write in-universe Harry Potter. She stole it from some other author. And now she's trying to do the same thing with Isabel, because Isabel, along with being very aspiring, also sort of puts her cart before the horse in that she actually makes people believe that she's written the next great young adult novel. And because of this, in-universe J.K. Rowling now wants to steal Isabel's book because she's not actually an author, but she wants to publish something new and make more money. So because of all her lies, Isabel gets involved with in-universe J.K. Rowling, and I remember someone trying to steal her work and her lying and saying that she keeps her book on microfinch, something like that, like what libraries keep like really old books on, in storage. And in-universe J.K. Rowling totally believes this. The other thing I remember is that there's this high-powered male character. I don't know if he's a lawyer or if he's like in-universe J.K. Rowling's business partner or something like that. But also he has a younger brother who is a lawyer, and that's important. Isabel is crushing on the high-powered guy, but ends up with the lawyer guy, which is good because she's also gotten herself into trouble agreeing to buy an expensive condo that she can't afford, and she doesn't know how to get out of this deal. I don't remember if she's signed something or not, or if it's just, she verbally agreed. I'll see when I read it. Anyway, all this mess, the in-universe J.K. Rowling stuff, the condo, and probably something else, she ends up telling her lawyer boyfriend all about this, and I am not exaggerating, he takes care of all of it. Like, that's the one thing I remember, is that she made this huge mess and then just her new boyfriend cleaned it up for her. And then to add insult to injury, the last chapter of the book is literally the same as the first. It's the first person narration going, God, today I feel so inspired. I can't wait to write it. It's today. Today is the day. I know it's today. And I just remember being so frustrated because this character demonstrably didn't learn anything. They had the same huge character flaw at the end that they do at the beginning. How's that a good story to read? But, okay, I want to be clear here. I haven't read this book in 10 years. This is just my memory. And just because the ending or the character arc isn't satisfying doesn't mean the rest of it isn't good. I mean, I read the whole thing for a reason. right? I hope so. I want to be clear that I don't hate this book or this author, and like, no one should be slamming the book or the author. I just remember being extremely frustrated when I was younger by this plot, by this character arc, or lack thereof. I actually just recently watched a limited series on Netflix where the cinematography and the dialogue and the acting, they were all beautiful, but the plot got kind of muddy towards the end. And it's entirely possible that this book is one of those things, and it's just that what my memory has remembered was the worst thing about it, which is why I want to explore it again, you know? Okay, so with that, I think I'm gonna go and actually film the rereading, which you'll have already seen by this point, and then, we'll do a wrap-up. It's been about 2 months since I started rereading this book, and about halfway through, I had pretty much given up. I thought I would just come back here and tell you all, I couldn't do it. It did it again. It made me stop reading. I couldn't finish it. But then what happened is I started editing the beginning of the video in preparation for filming the part where I told you I wasn't going to read the rest of it. And the things that I brought up in the first half of this video made me sort of think, wow, I still have questions that need answers. Here are the 3 things that I think I was looking for when I decided to revisit this book. Number 1, is anything about this book redeemable? What I mean by that is I talked about how I viewed this as a bad book, that in my mind it was one of the worst books I'd ever read, but that also I had seen a lot of fiction where just because the plot was bad didn't mean that everything else was bad. And now, as a more mature person, I wanted to see if there was something I could commend about this book. Nowadays, when I give book reviews, I do try to find some good things no matter what, so I wanted to see what it was for this book. Number 2, I wanted to see how accurate my memory was. My memories are 10 years old at this point of this book, and I wanted to see what I summarized to you before I started rereading, how accurate that was. And number 3, I wanted to try to figure out why this book made me stop reading for 8 years. Okay, so question 1. Is there anything redeemable about this book? That's so mean. Question 1. What can I compliment about this book? Honestly, the writing is really solid. This book makes me feel things, and we'll get on to that later, and a badly written book couldn't do that. The pacing's pretty good, the characters are pretty well established, but the writing is really good. And in my opinion, first-person point of view is very hard to pull off well. The writing style is good. The way that elements would be introduced and reintegrated and come up later, the way that characters wove in and out, and yet I still could keep track of all of them, all extremely well done. So yes, there are some good things about this book. There are some things that if I was writing a review, or I should say when I leave a review, I can actually commend about it and say, yes, this is done very well. Question 2. How good was my memory? Actually pretty spot on for the last third of the book. One of the reasons I ended up going, no, I must finish this book, is because nothing I had remembered had appeared yet, which was very strange because I thought I remembered a fairly detailed summary. And I did. It was just the last third or so of the book that I so clearly remembered. But given that, my memory was pretty solid. There is the comparison of J.K. Rowling to who I called in-universe J.K. Rowling, but I still think I'm right about that. I still think the author's point was, okay, yes, Harry Potter exists in this universe too, but here's our J.K. Rowling. Like, I do think that was the point. I remembered the real estate agent nagging at the main character. I remembered her being interested in one high-powered guy and ending up with his brother. The brother was introduced very late in the book, actually. I was surprised about that. And I even remember down to the character not really having an arc that completes. What I forgot is that there's a semblance of her getting a backbone, her telling the truth, her standing up for herself. And that was really interesting. I forgot about that because it's immediately undone like 3 pages later. But there is an inkling that the author knew that the character should grow and should change and should learn from this experience. Number 3. Why did this make me stop reading? Like I said, it almost did it again. I was struggling not only to read this book, but even to read anything else as a palate cleanser. And it took me a while to realize exactly what had happened. This book burned me out. This book caused emotional reading burnout for me. And you might be wondering, how is that possible? Well, this book entirely subsists on secondhand embarrassment. The main character, Isabel, she is kind of a disaster. And I think we're supposed to find that funny or relatable. But honestly, I can't imagine anyone reading this and being like, oh yes, I lie this often, I exaggerate the truth, and it gets me in all sorts of trouble. Like, I can't imagine that. If you can, leave a comment, and I'm sorry that I'm sorry that I said that this couldn't happen to someone. This book is just a series of Isabel lying, getting herself into trouble, exaggerating the truth, withholding facts from people, focusing on her imagined idea of her life and future and living as though that's the truth and not living within her means. She does fail upward quite a bit, which is interesting. And she is incredibly good-natured despite all the mess ups that she has. You do really feel for her. She is very earnest. But that secondhand embarrassment, I just couldn't deal with it. My anxiety was pinging like crazy. I had to put the book down so often. I had to set timers to force myself to read it for this video. This book isn't for me. It's almost as if I had read a horror novel. Like, lots of people like to read horror, I just don't. I don't have the emotional bandwidth for that. And so you might have the emotional bandwidth for this. It's very well written, the main character is really sweet, and while her choices do annoy me, I don't think that makes me dislike her, which is very strange. Like, I never, in all my memories, I never went, ugh, Isabel, the main character, she's awful, I hate the main character. I was always like, oh, the plot, the decisions the author made the character make, which is a very interesting distinction for me to make, and looking back and realizing it is very strange. All in all, I think I would give The Glamorous Double Life of Isabella Bookbinder 3 stars. It's not for me, but I definitely think there's an audience out there for it. Now, here's an interesting observation I made while rereading this book. A lot of characters in Isabella's life are set up that kind of aren't paid off. She has her best friend, Laura. She has a best friend, Laura. She has another friend, Barry, who's a chef. She now has her boyfriend, Will. There are her parents. There's a lot of drama there. She has, I think, 2 brothers. It feels like we're creating, I almost said a cinematic universe. It feels like we're creating a world that goes way beyond this one book, which made me think, I wonder what else this author has written. Because it says it's her first novel, and the whole point of this novel is writing a debut novel. Like, that's how the book ends. Now all I need is a debut novel. Which I almost wonder if that was like an ironic turn of phrase because this is Holly McQueen's debut novel. So I did a little digging, and Isabel has at least 2 more books. Am I going to read them?